So today we're going to talk about all the reasons The Boys works while Marvel just continues to go through with this reckless train wreck. You'd be genuinely surprised at just how clever this show is, especially with its themes and its characters. And there is one particular theme that the show gets right that really makes it stand out. So let's get into it, shall we? So The Boys is a satirical story of what the world would actually look like if we someday happen to have beings with the ability to rip through the sky and travel Manhattan within seconds. The show pretty much took the world by surprise by just being the absolute opposite of what the superhero genre essentially is. In contrast to our selfless heroes who can lay down their lives for literal random strangers, the heroes, and The Boys with air quotes of course, are quite literally the opposite. They're willing to let planes full of people die just cause.
Lift the plane? How? There's nothing to stand on. It's fucking air.
They can ram through people, instantly killing them without feeling a single shred of remorse. To sum it up really well, they're just selfless pieces of shit. And even that doesn't really do justice to the extent at which these people are ruthlessly maniacal and outright evil. Like, they're so evil, even I'm terrified of them. And believe me, that doesn't happen a lot. To say the show was satisfying to watch is a great understatement. It was more like awesome. And while I was watching the show, it occurred to me, what has Marvel been up to? And DC. For those of you who don't know and for those of you who do, let's go over it for a sec. Ever since Endgame ended, we've got shows like She-Hulk, WandaVision, and Moon Knight, and movies like The Marvels, which is just among my top 10 of worst movies of all time. And from DC, we've got movies like The Flash. We don't even need more examples on that end, basically the whole franchise is shit. Now, all these movies and shows I just mentioned are few among a surprisingly long list of utter flops by both critics and audiences. And on this channel, I've covered some of those movies and why they flopped the way they did. However, I mostly just talk about what is happening within the movies that make them the absolute eyesore. I don't ever really talk about what happens behind the scene. And it's kind of funny that The Boys unknowingly shines light on what goes on behind the scenes in these giant corporations, especially, if you haven't guessed it by now, corporations like Marvel. Now obviously neither Marvel nor DC have ruthless superpowered beings, and I'd like to think they don't actively plot to take over the government someday. That said, they are still a company just like VOD, and as such, no matter what anyone says, guess what? They love numbers. A lot. And especially with Disney, which is the parent company of Marvel, is becoming more and more obvious by the second. The thing is, Endgame was a focal and very pivotal point in the MCU timeline. Some even say it was the peak of the MCU, and we're not getting anything better than that, which by the way is becoming a reality. Anyway, continuing from an event like that is actually pretty difficult to do. There's something that happens to all types of individuals and companies. Musicians worry that they won't be able to release another hit song. Filmmakers and content creators struggle with the same thing, and business owners / companies struggle with staying one step ahead of their competitors. There's just this inherent worry that comes after an event that seems to be the peak. And that's exactly why Marvel has been pumping more content out within the last 3 years than probably the last decade, in an attempt to build to the next main event, the next endgame. It's similar to what we see with VOD because they literally use hard numbers and points to gauge how valuable a hero is to the organization, and how well the company is doing overall. If the numbers are up, that means they're doing something right. If the numbers are down, even by just decimals, it is a full-on disaster. Now that's not even where the real problem is. The real issue is that VOD will do literally anything to get those numbers up, like outing a gay person without their consent, and pulling the brakes on A-Train as soon as he couldn't run anymore. Now when we're talking about Marvel, well, it's obvious just how bad things must be behind the scenes, to be seeing the absolute garbage we're seeing on screen. I mean, just how bad did it have to be to get this kind of scene? Aside speculation, Marvel has had issues with directors like Scott Derrickson, who stopped directing Doctor Strange 2 due to creative differences. And can I just say, as a Doctor Strange fan myself, I did not like what happened with the Multiverse of Madness. Marvel have also delayed the release of several of their productions, an example of that also being Doctor Strange. They've also rewritten several scripts just to align with branding, like with Ant-Man Quantumania and The Marvels. Another major way The Boys just dominates post-Endgame Marvel is with the character. Now this should come as no shock to literally anyone, but ever since Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans, and all our other faves left the MCU, there's just been this gaping hole, and there hasn't been anyone to fill it. Falcon? No. Captain Marvel, definitely not. And if we can't even say much for the characters we've already seen and known pre-Endgame, what are we going to say about the characters we're just getting to know now? Nothing. We have nothing to say about them, because they're not in the least bit compelling. And that's even the heroes. The villains are way worse, because I have no idea how we went from villains like Ultron, Hela and Thanos to villains like Darwin and Kang. The Boys is the complete opposite of this. Each character has strong motivations, and they don't just act according to what the plot says, they actually have depth. Pick any character and you will find that you can relate to what drives them, and if you can't relate, you will at least understand. On the other hand, it seems Marvel has made it their priority to give us stupid villains. I mean, just try comparing Darwin to Homelander. Like, you can't even make the comparison. That's how bad it is. Homelander is terrifying just as, if not even more terrifying than Thanos. When this guy is on screen, I am visibly on edge because there is no telling what is going to happen next with him. He can do crazy things like murder his comrade within a heartbeat, just like that. And there's really no one who can stop him. It just gives the effect of a ticking time bomb. Now, considering how powerful he is, it is easy to fall into the trap of making this character flat. However, Homelander is far from that. He is flawed just like the rest of us, and can even be weak sometimes when faced with some challenge. This is the chef's kiss formula for a great villain that both Marvel and DC somehow forgot. The Boys also doesn't have the shackles of being painfully censored. There is graphic violence, sex, and very disturbing head explosions. This makes it a breath of fresh air in the superhero genre, as we would never have dreamed to get content like this. Now, it does make sense to keep things PG to allow a wider, younger audience to view it, but doesn't it also make sense to unveil the curtains for older audiences as well? I mean, we've all seen the potential gory TV shows and movies have, time and time again, like with Game of Thrones. And in a world filled with superpowered beings, wouldn't it make sense for there to be unhinged violence? I understand that there are superhero movies that are for older audiences. My point is that we need more of them. We've all seen how well movies like Deadpool and the X-Men have done. Even DC animated movies like Justice League Apocalypse all have a higher rating that just makes them inherently more enjoyable to watch. There's just something different with movies where the directors have more creative freedom over and are not bound by the shackles of making clearly adult content PG. The funny thing is, I think Marvel's starting to catch on to this. In an era where their beloved PG movies are barely struggling to break even, and TV shows like The Boys and Invincible are getting bigger and better each season, Marvel might be noticing a shift in the times, and that's probably why they're bringing forth projects like Blade next year, which are rated R, and in quotes, are willing to give more freedom to creative teams. Honestly, I wish they'd have done this with Doctor Strange 2 as well, and though that movie did perform really well at the box office, I personally feel it didn't achieve what it could have critically, had the directors had more freedom. And Doctor Strange 2 frankly was still a good movie. I mean, it was directed by Sam Raimi. It is far better than what we're getting these days, that's for sure. The Boys has unleashed upon us a side of the superhero genre we didn't know we wanted, not only with its gore and violence, but through its acute satire of the government and even big corporations like the very one that produced it, Amazon. I promise that you will never see another superhero movie that pokes at celebrity culture, religion, and even big corporations the way The Boys does it, unapologetically. I'm even surprised how they managed to touch on so much, and yet the story still remains grounded. It's really impressive actually. If we even take a look at Batman, which is still DC's best performing superhero when it comes to movies, you need to ask why he has such a great appeal. It's actually simple. It's because his story is dark and rooted in serious themes that would appeal to much older, much more invested audiences. Let's face it, the fact is the bulk of the superhero genre audience are people in their late teens to mid-30s. Some are even in the 45 to 60 range. Yeah, the baby boomer range. The same people who watched Spider-Man, X-Men, and Batman some decade ago are the same people watching those films today. The only thing is, they grew up, and they expected those movies to grow up with them. Which is why it doesn't sit well with critics and audiences alike when we have Captain Marvel literally dancing like a Disney princess when she's supposed to be saving the goddamn world. One thing I want to talk about is tension. And this is where the other points I gave converge in one giant cesspool. I don't think any of us have to be Einstein to point out the gigantic disparity between these two when it comes to delivering tension. The Boys is phenomenal. Most of the time you have no idea what's going to happen next. Is Homelander going to rip into the sky and laser off the Statue of Liberty, or is he going to murder Starlight in cold blood? Personally, while watching, there were several moments where I was genuinely anxious and uncertain about the fate of our protagonists, and the only other show that's made me feel this way in a long time is, you guessed it, Game of Thrones. In contrast, however, Marvel has become so formulaic and the characters are so cliche that I literally feel zero tension while watching their movies nowadays. It's like my brain's just down and out. The last Marvel movie to evoke some tension for me was Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. And before that, it was Infinity War. Speaking of Infinity War, that's why the movie did so well. There was such uncertainty for the fate of our protagonist that we, the viewers, could almost taste just how dire the situation was, with Thanos winning over and over again throughout the movie and later going on to win at the end as well. It was shocking, it was bizarre, no one expected this to happen, yet it did. And that's what made the movie Marvel's most iconic movie till date. Even Endgame doesn't live up to the precedent of Infinity War. The Boys has set a standard for superhero movies moving forward, with undeniably intriguing characters, clever use of story elements, and breathtaking tension. Marvel needs to retrace their steps and learn from this series that seems to be only getting bigger and better each season, while Marvel numbers continue to go down. Do you think The Boys should be their role model? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it. It really helps the channel grow beyond what you think, and it only takes you a literal second. Just do it, just tap the button. If you like this video and you want more from me, don't forget to subscribe. I have a buckload of videos about The Boys just waiting to be uploaded. So if you don't want to miss them, subscribe. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye.